Welcome everyone to the Mantra Corner featuring the Dark Prince, Dre Corbitt. Well, this conversation has been long overdue, and we've been meaning to get together and talk about some of these topics so that we can kind of, just get a baseline, see where some people are at, see if we have some questions that might arise out of it, and see if we can take our perspective and shift it into a whole new reality and see where that brings us. So I'd like to introduce Dre, my man here, who's rocking and rolling on this spiritual path with me for many years and has been a continuous source of inspiration, friendship, and, camaraderie, brotherhood, and motivation to keep going and keep going deeper and increase our capacity for transmitting this understanding to others and really making a difference in this world. So welcome, Dre. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And so we've also been working together at, we've been doing our own mentorship. We have a mastermind that we are a part of as well. And, we meet regularly to discuss certain things and to elevate our consciousness and to kind of experiment with different ideas and bounce them off each other's heads and, bring any issues that we're having to the table so that we can, do the round table thing and just come to a resolution. Sometimes it's easier to get a second pair of eyes on something, So anyways, I was figuring we could talk about, some of the things that have been coming up in our discussions as of late, as far as, dealing with anxiety and different ways of approaching it.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So, I guess start by, giving me some feedback into maybe one of the ways or a couple of the ways in which you've experienced anxiety.
So a lot of the ways that I can experience anxiety typically comes into work, dealing with clients, meeting deadlines, meeting expectations. A lot of my anxiety resides there. And the other half of my anxiety resides in the unknown, things that are out of my control, things that are out of my hands, things I have no power with.
Okay. So when we, let's just pick one and see if we can break it down a little bit, because we talked about a little bit about the anxiety destroying algorithm, where we're trying to dissect it and see, if we can become aware of different aspects of what we're dealing with, then we can know. It's sort of like, I remember when I was learning how to do the Rubik's Cube when I was a kid, you would learn these patterns and eventually you would recognize the pattern. You'd be like, oh, I remember this one before. Now I just do this. I do this, 10 times this way, 10 times this way, blah, blah, blah. Next thing you know, boop, thing's solved. Awesome. And so every time I recognize that pattern, I know how to solve it, I know how to deal with it. And so that's why the awareness training that we're doing is really important at, being able to create, for instance, a theoretical model of what is going on so we understand how is anxiety being created, how am I creating it from within based on, a few different things. And what I've narrowed it down to is that it hangs on the identity. It has to have something to hang on. Anxiety can't just exist out there in the world. It needs a person, a me, an ego, if you will, or a character in order to hang its weight upon. And so that's one of the things that you can start to ask yourself when you experience it is okay, is this, can I get a sense of how it's my identity that is feeling anxious right now? It's because I'm identified as this character. For instance, if I'm worried about some future event, how is it going to affect me?
Right.
And if I'm thinking about it like that, then I'm identified as the character and I'm going to potentially suffer anxiety. Another way that we create anxiety is when we create meaning out of things in such a way as to make us upset, concerned, worried, fearful, and things. So if I think, this election coming up, for instance, is probably making tons of people anxious. The unknown, like you were saying, we don't know what this is going to mean. Whether this person gets elected or this person gets elected, a lot of people are still, we're all in the unknown. We don't know what the future holds. So a lot of people say, that we're living in uncertain times, and it's a dangerous reality that we're living in. And that's one meaning that we could give to it.
Right.
We could also look at it a different kind of way where we're at this transformational time. We're on the cusp of the age of, enlightenment, of a new age of enlightenment for mankind, And that would be a totally different experience that we would have if we looked at it that way.
Right.
And it might generate a lot of excitement versus anxiety.
But it's hard to, because, you know, the majority of us, we've been identified with our ego for so long. So, you know, I try to talk to some people about trying to overcome things like that, and they say things to me like, you know, it's almost like you are offending them by telling them that they don't have to be this character, because they identify with this character, they identify with the struggles that they've had to go through, and it's like, you know, it's almost like you are stripping away something that they worked so hard for when you try to show them something different, which makes it extremely difficult.
People are very attached to their suffering. Yeah, you're right. And so when I identify with a character who's experienced, you know, and maybe you did really have a difficult time in the past, right? But if you identify as a sufferer, as a victim, and you hold that identity, and someone comes along and they're like, you know, you could just let go of that identity and stuff, and they get very self-righteous and indignant, or, you know, angry and defensive, you know, about their character. Like, I suffered all this thing, you tell me I can just let it go now,
right?
You know, or I could just, you know, forget about it. Like, no, I can't. And so, yeah, that can keep people trapped, because as long as we're identified, we're going to suffer. And what we can do, though, is through practice, and this is what we've been working a lot in our mastermind, is we can learn how to honor that identity, right? But recognize that we created it. We created it mostly through unconscious choice, through our experience, how we labeled things, the meaning we gave to it, and also things that were outside of our control, like the environment we grew up in, our childhood, things like that.
Right.
But ultimately, we gave those experiences meaning, mostly unconsciously, automatically. But we can take the reins back, and we can actually make a conscious decision to recreate ourselves with a new identity, one that is much more empowered to achieve the things that we want,
right.
One who is less riddled with anxiety and, you know, the weight of the past, and who's just less identified with all those burdens of suffering and anxiety from the past.
Right.
And then, but really what the next level of this whole thing, which is where we're heading, is beyond all that. That's still like kind of like, I like the analogy of moving the pieces around or moving the icons around on the desktop versus diving into the source code where you can really affect change. So when we're changing identity, it's kind of like we're just moving those pieces around. We're just moving around the furniture in our prison and thinking that that's freedom.
Right.
The ultimate freedom comes from when we can snap out of it and recognize we aren't any character.
Right.
We're something much deeper and much more profound. And when we recognize that and then experience it, and when we live from that deeper self, that changes everything. From that deeper self, there are levels of mind that are totally impervious to anxiety. Anxiety is not possible, because anxiety can really only orient itself at this level of thinking mind, at the level of where the level of identity is.
Right.
It exists in the thinking mind, like in the head kind of area. But when we unhook from there, you know, we can learn to make our awareness more malleable and shift and access these different levels of awareness that are non-dual, for instance, or, you know, it's not a state of being detached, like when you're, you know, like in some ketamine trance or something. It's a state where you're much more embodied, fully engaged, but you're just not hooked to the character.
Right. And for the people that can't really get that concept down, it's good to start with at least creating a character that can withstand the things that it has to do. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we started. It's kind of like how we discovered this.
Exactly.
It's like we had to start somewhere. So we started by recognizing, oh shit, I created this character and I'm creating my own suffering. And so we started to recognize, okay, start to take control there. And yeah, if that's all we have access to, that's still very empowering, and we can still do a lot of good there. Because
confidence goes a long way. You know, sometimes we talk so badly to ourselves, you know, I can't do this, or this is too hard. Just having the confidence that you can handle whatever comes to you is a good character. It's a good character that could get you to, you know, to the next level, perhaps.
Yeah, sure. And the thing is, my experience and what I want to dive into more with this training and where we're headed is that the less I'm identified as any character, even the most confident character in the world that I could possibly build, right? There's like a connection that we have to ourselves that's deeper than anything that we can create on the mind, on the mental level of mind. And when we access that and we connect with that deeper core, we access a confidence which is beyond story. You know, it's beyond, it's not made up, it's not built up, it's not puffed up, and it can't be destroyed. So because it's not created, it can't be destroyed. It's innate, belongs to us.
Okay. I could definitely see that. I could see the benefits of both routes for sure.
We're going both at the same time, really, is what we've been doing. So, like, check the time here. Okay, we're good. Yeah, so, you know, we've been really going both routes. We've been working at it from the level of identity first and trying to change that character, you know, and recognizing, using awareness practices and, you know, just by developing this theoretical model of understanding and seeing how it comes together, how it's formed, and how the anxiety gets formed within the character. All that stuff is building our awareness. We're becoming more and more aware of the different facets and aspects of this whole thing.
Right.
So that it empowers us, because now anytime we catch any piece of it, it can, for a moment, we recognize, oh shit, I'm anxious. A lot of times, like I mentioned in a previous video, I've been so anxious my whole life and didn't even realize it. I thought I was not an anxious person at all, because my understanding of anxiety was basically related towards worry about the future, number one. And number two is that a lot of times when I was actually anxious, I didn't recognize it. I didn't have the self-awareness to even see that I was in this anxious state and that it was being perpetuated by my own mental loop.
Right. And unfortunately, there's so many people out there that suffer, and they're angry people. They're people that are bored. You know what I mean? It's like all these different forms of anxiety that come up all the time that we wouldn't even be aware of. And now, you know, with this program that you have going on, you can actually see that anytime I'm feeling like something shouldn't be happening is anxiety.
Yes. Yeah, we've broadened the definition basically to include any feeling. It's a mental, an emotional state of upset.
Right.
Right? And it comes from, just as you were saying, you know, something is there that you don't want, right? Or you want things to be different, but you either can't control the situation right now, or you can't control it effectively the way you want to. And so you feel somewhat powerless or limited in that aspect. And so it's like we have this resistance. We want to control something that we cannot control, and that creates the anxiety. And so, you know, how many times throughout the day are we faced with situations that we don't like or that aren't ideal, that we'd like to change, but we really can't effectively?
Right.
And anytime we are going through that, which is like a lot, it has the potential to create anxiety in us if we're not highly alert and understanding of, you know, and aware of ourselves.
And what are some of the problems of dealing with anxiety that you know commonly?
Well, I mean, just for a lot of people, they take medications to treat them, and then it has a deleterious, you know, co-occurring effect, which is that, you know, yeah, it may elevate your mood to some extent, or it doesn't let it dip down so low, but then it limits your ability to access certain depths of feeling. Right. Or, you know, some people have sexual dysfunction as a result of those. Some people just get spaced out or really, really tired a lot, which, you know, I went through a really difficult period of time when, you know, for a couple of weeks I was taking some psychotropic medications prescribed to me as a way of trying to deal with it. And, you know, again, and that's what I experienced. It was like, yeah, it made me a little bit numb to it. It did take some of the pain away, but then I was constantly tired and had no energy, and it was like everything just started to become really dull.
Right.
And I was like, I'm giving up an awful lot just to avoid facing what it is that I don't want to face within myself.
And sometimes that anxiety is not necessarily a bad thing. Like, we have trained our brains to look at the anxiety as something that we want to stop. But sometimes anxiety is just an indication that we need to create some type of action. And without that anxiety, we'd be stuck in no action.
Good point. Good point. And what I've been doing lately is I've been using anxiety as a trigger to awaken me into the non-dual state, which is freedom from all anxiety. And it's also like a recognition of my own true self and a reconnection with that true self and being able to live from there. So that's another great point, is that as we start to recognize all these different facets, it gives us different doorways into freedom. We can say, oh, I'm feeling, concerned about this election. Okay, where's that coming from? Now I start to do the work. Is it coming from my identity? Because is there anything I can do about it? Well, yeah, okay, maybe I could vote. Or, I could talk to somebody and try to convince them to change their vote and vote the way that I think is going to be best. And there are sometimes things that you can do. But aside from that, it's like we're mostly powerless. Like, this is a huge event, and we have a very, very tiny part in it, any one of us. And so, that could create a lot of anxiety because there's uncertainty and powerlessness. You want to control something and you can't. So that could be an invitation for you to say, well, am I worried about the meaning that this is giving, or am I just worried because I'm, identified as this person who's afraid, what's going to happen to me?
Right.
What's going to happen to me? That's like that uncertainty. And anytime we recognize, okay, if I'm thinking or feeling what's going to happen to me, I'm identified. Oh, shit, that's great. I'm identified.
Right.
I know tools. I can unhook from that mental identification. I can recognize it through awareness, unhook, relocate, become aware of awareness itself in its pure form. And once I've done that, it's the mind isn't like an after effect. The identity is an after effect. It gets created and then we live through it. But if we can go to a point in awareness before it's been created, if this is making sense, we can access life directly from the now moment rather than through the filter of the mind as an individual and how this applies to me.
Right.
So that's the big difference. When I snap out of that, fucking Zen, baby.
That's what I'm talking about. Now, we all know that you've been a Trump supporter for the last 3 years, and I know that causes you a lot of anxiety. Can you tell us the tools that you use?
Oh, God. Am I going to have to cut this part out? I don't support a whole lot of political people, really, honestly. So,
because Biden's coming for that ass. I know that gives you some anxiety.
That's what the word on the street is. All right. Yeah. All right. Well, that's good. Way to take this conversation on a totally different turn. And
what gives me much anxiety these days is just not knowing where things are going, because we're clearly going through a huge change and a huge shift in humanity altogether. And it looks like it could go one of two ways, because things seem to be split down 50-50. You got people who are kind of entrusting of the government and the media, and then you got the people who are questionable of the government and the media and the information that is fed to us, which is causing us anxiety on all ends, on all levels, but it's split down the side. How do you expect us to deal with this when there's anxiety on both ends?
Well, that's where we don't really know what's coming either, too. I mean, yeah, it could go any different way. And I have some opinions and ideas about it. We'll probably save those for a different broadcast, though, because that's going to get us in a totally different tangent.
Sure.
But, the thing is, yeah, when we're identified as an individual, it doesn't matter what side we're on. There is the potential for anxiety. There's a huge potential for anxiety, right? But there's another way of looking at it. There are many ways of looking at it for sure, but there's definitely another level of perspective for us that we can take, which connects us with the totality. Because when we're viewing it from the identity, we are in a dualistic state, and we're seeing that there is the other side. There's what they want. It's not what we want. There's what we want. Doesn't jibe with what they want. So there's that battle, that tension. We don't know. The certainty of the future is nil. We're definitely at a cusp. There's a lot of, things going on. People are experiencing transformations, suffering, awakenings, all sorts of things worldwide. And so when I think about it from that level of mind, yeah, it's definitely like there's turmoil and turbulence and all sorts of stuff, and we don't know where it's going. But when I do shift and I access it directly from the non-dual awareness, what's kind of felt is that it's like the churning of the clothes in the washing machine and just wringing them out. It's all turmoil and everything, but at the end, everything comes out clean. And that's kind of like my hope for things, and kind of like where I see things going as well. And at the same time, when I'm viewing it from that level of mind, I can view it from an anxiety-free space, from a space that is, open to what's going on around me. Like the blinders are off, my peripheral is open. Because when you're identified, you get a very narrow focus, and you miss a lot. And so there's, opportunities for growth. There's opportunities for service. There's opportunities for transformation. There's so many things going on around us. But if we get stuck in our identity, we'll be so narrowly limited to a lot of, just what the media is pumping out, or what other people are pumping out, or, all that kind of stuff that's right in front of us, and our fears and, concerns from this limited state.
Right.
And it's not helpful. It doesn't serve us. It doesn't serve the world, really.
No, especially with the lack of compassion. A lot of the anxiety is caused because, we're always so selfish that we're sitting and thinking about how to make things comfortable in our little part of the island, So we don't know what the other is thinking. We don't know what the other is planning. We're trying to preserve what we have, what we find to be sacred, what we find to be safe. So I believe a lot of anxiety could be squashed by having an open heart and having more compassion as well.
Well, that's definitely true. A lot of it will be squashed. And then this is the difference again. I would just want to keep pointing it out because I think it's really important, is that when we are aware, what did you say? When we're open-hearted, when we're aware of the heart, right? It reduces anxiety tremendously, and that's absolutely true. But when we are aware from the heart, from that open-hearted, awake awareness, the non-identified state, not I'm aware of the heart, but I'm aware from the heart, there is no anxiety. Anxiety has to happen up here in the character, but when we're unhooked, right, and we're living from here, you can still have compassion. You can still see suffering, and it won't necessarily make you anxious. It might spurn you to act, to try to help.
So if any of this seems confusing or weird, what Colin is basically saying is that when we can operate from different areas inside the body. Different areas inside the body have different types of intelligence. So where we typically think from and make decisions from is our brain center. What Colin is suggesting is that we start bringing our awareness down to the heart center and allowing us to make decisions from there.
Yeah, and it's kind of like not even that we're making decisions when this happens. It's more like we disconnect from the decision maker, and we live from this spontaneous, open-hearted center, which is aware of things, which is intelligent, and which knows. So when it sees a child crying, it knows to pick it up. It doesn't need a mentation saying, oh, I better pick that child up, or someone's going to think I'm a bad mother, or, I wonder, oh, something must be wrong. Let me go see what's wrong, and
right.
I'm anxious and worried. No, it's just intelligent awareness functioning through the body-mind in the most possibly effective way that could be, and totally anxiety-free. That's where I want to live from most of the time, and that's what I'm working on. So these processes are very helpful for that.
Right. Very helpful indeed, and I encourage anyone that's watching right now to come and join us during our journey here. Co has spent a lot of time developing a program that's working. I'm actually taking it myself. I've learned a lot, even though I've like he's mentioned before, I've been in my spiritual journey for quite some time now. I still learn something every week from this program. And here, I'll even go down and tell you one of the things that I've learned, because I still deal with a lot of anxiety all the time. But now I can at least find some space in between the anxiety and myself, when before I was completely identified with the anxiety. the ability to find the space between you and the anxiety allows you to realize that that is not you. That's something that I learned from Co. And without that, I was stuck most times. You know, like you get stuck into these situations where you're thinking about the past of what could go wrong, or, you know, like I said, a lot of my anxiety comes from work.
Cool. We got a couple more minutes.
A lot of my anxiety comes from work. So it was really good to be able to learn tactics like that I could have in my back pocket to use at any time. And if you're dealing with any anxiety and you want to come and you want to discuss it and you want to learn some things, I suggest you come and contact Co. and maybe see if you can get screened to do the Anxiety Destroyer course.
Cool. And if anyone wants to look into that, we'll put some links in the comments and things like that. Be sure to like and subscribe, ring the bell, all that stuff, so you don't miss any notifications for, you know, other conversations like this. And much love, my man Dre. Thank you so much for coming on the program today.
My pleasure.
It's been a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to doing more of these things. So thank you guys for watching, and look forward to seeing you all on another video real soon. Much love, and remember, resistance is futile.
Anxiety Destroyer.
Charging on to
victory.
Well, I'd like to welcome everyone today to this issue of
Wild and Out, featuring Kolaran.
Okay. Let's try this again.